team that is no stranger to the cellar, and Bulls fans, I'm so sorry. When you're 4-26 in not even 3 full seasons under your last head coach, it just is what it is. 1-11 USF is how we're finishing out this one. And it's because a program, I think USF is a program that just doesn't get any buzz. They don't get any sort of run on the national scale, and yet I think the ceiling for USF is 8, 9 wins if they're really humming on all cylinders. They're in
The ceiling's
Tampa.
even higher than that, man. The ceiling has been 11 wins in the
Yeah.
past. Like they've gotten way, way up there.
Yeah. Especially in the new American, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
you lose your flagship programs. Now we'll see what UTSA brings over as all these conferences realign, but they're in Tampa. They are in a mecca of high school football, and yet they're not recruiting their own state effectively. They have 15 signees for this class once everything is finalized in a week or two. Only 4 of those guys, according to my count, are from Florida. That's just not good enough. You obviously fire Jeff Scott. Rest in peace to Jeff Scott, who went 4-26 in not even 3 full seasons. Scott is now at Clemson, where he was the wide receivers coach before he got hired down to Tampa. He's returned to the homestead, supposed to be maybe the best wide receivers coach in college football, though I think Brian Hartline would have something to say about that. I
Yes,
will
he would.
say, they're 1-11, but they were kind of competitive in a couple games. Guys, they're a missed field goal away from forcing overtime against Florida. Now, Florida wasn't a juggernaut this year, but still, competing with a team that has multiple 4 and 5 stars, that's nothing to sneeze at. Pretty much everything needs to go right for USF and can be improved with the Bulls. Where are some elements that you guys would say, okay, here's if I'm taking over this program and maybe they're a 5-year plan candidate down the line, where's kind of that first step that you're starting with?
I think I'm going to try to be transfer portal U
Yeah.
for all of these Florida guys that leave the state and then don't cut it out wherever they go. So if they're,
Mhm.
a highly rated guy out of high school, they go sign with Georgia or Ohio State or Alabama, Clemson, all these programs that are just raiding the state of Florida like we talked about with Miami. I'm gonna try to brand myself as transfer portal U for those guys that are ready to make a homecoming after maybe getting homesick after the first year, or not cutting it out, or not making a starting position. Come on home to Tampa, and we will get you all the reps you possibly want. There's a lot of guys that could be in that situation every single year. You couple that with getting cherry picking just 4 or 5 guys from your immediate area that are getting overlooked by the big boys in Florida. I think you can put together a really talented roster for the American that way. At least a roster that's fighting for bowl eligibility, not going 1-11,
That's what
right?
UCF does.
Yeah, that's what UCF does every single year. They're not getting 4 or 5 star guys, or they're not originally, but now they're starting to compete for those 4 or 5 star guys because
Right.
people realizing that they can get developed there. So yeah, I mean, that's my at least, surface level plan. Obviously, much easier said than done. You've got to be able to back up that you can provide an avenue to playing time and, development to these guys. But yeah, I just think there's enough talent in the state of Florida in the high school levels and guys that are wanting to transfer out of those schools and come back home to put together at least a competitive roster.
Mhm.
No, you're absolutely right about the transfer side of it. The high school side of it is the harder part, right? Because you're going to have talented guys coming out of these cities, and they're going to be looking at, oh, well, look at what Florida State just did. They just put up a pretty good season. Oh yeah, Miami's got loads going on too. Big recruiting class. Maybe I should consider going over there.
But
Oh
they
well,
need to shoot
Florida's
for the
still that
next
guy
tier
too.
down. They need to not shoot for those guys that are actually getting
Well,
offers from those
but you
guys.
also have to consider this is where a lot of people are looking as well. Everyone knows that Florida's talent rich. So Georgia's trying to reach across the
Yeah.
border. And then, Alabama and Auburn are both trying to recruit this. You're still going to have the Mississippi schools recruiting this. Like everyone in the SEC is going to look at Florida and try to recruit this. And not
And they're
just
going
the
head to head
SEC.
against UCF for
Exactly, and
yeah.
UCF, and so you're starting to realize, like, yeah, this is going to be tough when you don't have anything on the wall to prove that you're that guy. Guys, they were the 130th scoring defense this year. They
Out
gave
of
up
how many?
out of 131. So they weren't the worst. Don't ask any more questions. They they weren't good. That's 41 points per game that they gave up. They gave up 516 yards of offense.
Yeah.
That's not good. I mean, you can talk about how their offense it was okay. Like they scored 28 points a game, 68th in the country. Like that's not terrible. That's pedestrian, right? It's middle of the road, not too bad. But a lot of those points are going to be coming in situations where you're already down 40 and we just want to go home. And so, I hate to say it, but man, you got to start playing some defense. Like you got to find a way to finish top 120 in defense before we start talking about, getting some of these guys to buy in. Trey, you mentioned developing players. What have they proven in developing players? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
Gary Bohannon had a great season with Baylor the year before, transfers over because he loses his job, completes 56% of his passes and barely over 1,000 yards passing. And I
Well, he had
understand he
yeah,
only played. I understand that extrapolated over the season,
still not good.
he wasn't putting up massive numbers here. He
Right.
was putting up, end of the season Stetson Bennett numbers. No offense, Stetson. Sorry, but like it's not a great situation in terms of what they've been able to develop. Now you got to hope it's on the coaching, right? And that the new coaching coming in is going to spur something new, and you're going to get some assistance, and that's going to be the guy, right? You got to hope that this great wide receivers coach is going to come in here and get something out of them. But I mean, man, you got to start doing something right, or 1-11. I don't want that to become the norm there, right? I don't want that to become the norm in a fairly competitive, American conference. Like that's not a nobody conference. There's some good teams in that conference that aren't going to roll over. That have some ambitions of being in some bigger bowl games and competing with some of these bigger programs and all that. So you know, you're kind of in a rough spot if you're South Florida, just in terms of who you're competing against in state for these recruits. And also, when you don't get those recruits and you got lower level guys anyways, you're not proving to these guys that you can, develop and compete. And so that I think the solution for them is, dumb as it might sound, is I think you just have to find some way, trick plays, play some defense, squeak some stuff out, pull some stuff out of thin air. You got to find a way to win some games this year and start to prove to guys that hey, this is a place that can be successful and have something to sell in the transfer portal to high school recruits, whatever it is. You got to sell something because
Mhm.
everybody else in the state, maybe not Florida necessarily, but everybody else in the state is skyrocketing in their stock, and it's gonna be hard to compete with that long term.
Well, and for high school recruiting, the trickle down is really going to hurt
Hmm.
USF because we talked about last episode how Miami is currently the tier two. And when Miami is the tier two, that just leaves almost nothing for the UCFs and
Yep.
USFs of the world. And when UCF is getting all of that next level of guys, yeah, like USF is really going to struggle. And that's why I'm thinking, primarily build it out of the transfer portal, not go full Texas
Yeah.
State. Don't go full Jake Spavital where you're taking zero high school kids.
Right.
Never
But
go full Jake Spavital.
you should never go full Jake Spavital. We should, put that on a sticker, a T-shirt, or something. But yeah, I mean, do not go, no high school kids, but really focus on getting your main difference makers from the transfer portal. And obviously, yeah, it's going to be like a last chance you situation because
Hmm.
no one wants to go to USF right now. But if that's your only option and you're talented, like sign them up and get the most out of them and coach up those guys. Coach who you can get. That's that. If you could boil it all down, just coach up who
Right.
you can get and fight for ball eligibility. Show that you can make progress.
Well, the UCF model, I think, is the path forward here. And Alex Golish, who's the new head coach, he's got to find that identity to sell, right? They thought it was going to be that athleticism, that pure playmaker that Jeff Scott had coached at Clemson. They thought that was going to be the selling point, right? Very similar to what Joey McGuire is selling at Texas Tech. The difference is Joey Mack's winning and Jeff Scott didn't, right? I mean, he beat Howard this year. That was the only game that he won before he was fired. So I think for Golish, an offensive line coach by trade, he's got to build up the trenches. And I think he's got to start by saying, hey, we're going to develop, I don't know what kind of offense he's going to run, but we're going to develop this kind of offense. And it's going to be built with good bones that start in the trenches, that give a quarterback the ability to make plays. And if you're a playmaker, you're coming here knowing, hey, we're going to recruit quarterbacks who will have time, who will have the resources to then distribute the football, whether that be through the air, be on the ground, etc. I think USF's going to have to win games in shootouts to start, right? And then you start to recruit some of that defensive line talent. Hopefully they can supplement it in the portal. I think USF's a fun brand. I think if they can be
Yeah,
good, it's it's
yeah,
it's a fun story to watch, right? I mean, you think back to 2007, like, heck yeah, man, let's go USF, right? I'd
yeah,
love to see them.
On the cover of Sports Illustrated as it
Yeah.
gets to number
right.
2 in the AP poll.
You know, what you could do is you could go the total other direction if you're USF and just say, I'm going to find the biggest possible offensive lineman who will commit to me. And we're going to do nothing but just bench and squat, stuff like that all off season. And we're going to get as strong as we can up front and just run it down your throat. We're going to find decent running backs who'll just throw their bodies at a wall, and we're just going to run it straight down your throat. And we're going to time a possession, and you can't score, 41 points on us again or 42 points a game on us if you get no time to do it, right? And you do that, you play low scoring games, and I mean that could be a way to do it. You kind of take the sort of the Tulane model. Obviously, Tulane played much better defense than what USF played, but they were kind of a possession team. Didn't do a whole bunch through the air this year. They're relying on some of their running game and just being a little bit stronger and possession ball. So you could kind of do the Tulane model. Play some good defense. Because you're only on the field for 15 minutes a game.
I did not see us ever referring to the Tulane model as a pipeline for success at the
Hey.
beginning of this season, and yet here we are, Cotton Bowl championship in hand.
Gracious him! How about